Indoor air quality and mold management are no longer just maintenance issues. They're brand issues, guest experience issues, and in many cases, risk management priorities. And nowhere is that more evident than in the global hospitality space, where expectations are high, environments are complex, and consistency can be overstated across locations is critical. And to discuss this today, I'm pleased to welcome two special guests to explore how global hospitality brands are uniquely approaching indoor air quality and mold, from standards and training to real world implementation across different regions. My guests today, we have Doug Hoffman with NORMI and John Greenwell with EcoLife Asia. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you on today. Well, let's get right into our topic. This is going to be a good program. We think about protecting people and making spaces safer. So, as you comment on my questions I have for you, please introduce yourself and a brief bio about what you do. And John, we're going to go to you on this first question. When you look at global hospitality brands and the work you do, and of course, we're going to hear what you do, how is their approach to indoor air quality and mold different from what you typically see in other sectors?
So my name is John Greenwell. My company is EcoLife Asia. Primarily, we do indoor air quality and mold consulting and audits, mostly in the luxury hotel space. But we also deal with a few commercial properties and some like five-star hotels. And we also do training in conjunction with NORMI, specifically targeting hotels. Looking at the hospitality space rather than more generic property issues, the global hospitality brands aren't just managing buildings. Basically, as you said, Jeff, they're managing guest experience and brand trust. A hotel can do everything right operationally, but it's really what the guest feels. So if they walk into a room and it feels stuffy or it smells off, that's what they remember. Because of that, the leading brands are being much more proactive rather than reactive. Build indoor air quality and mold prevention into their brand standards, design decisions, and daily operations rather than treating it as a reactive maintenance issue. In Asia, brand standards are typically higher than local jurisdictional standards, particularly with things like relative humidity and particulate levels. And global brands really have to do this at scale across many properties in very different climates. So they understand that a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. The strongest organizations set global frameworks but allow for local adaptation. Increasingly, IAQ is not just risk management, it's revenue and reputation. So air quality standards affect comfort, reviews, repeat stays, and even staff retention, which is a critical issue that many properties just don't recognise. So it's really moved from the back of the house right into the boardroom.
Thank you. Good details. And Doug, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so my name's Doug Hoffman, and I'm the Executive Director of NORMI, National Organization of Remediators and Microbial Inspectors. And we do training and certification for professionals in the indoor air quality space, not just specifically for mold, but mold, bacteria, viruses, all kinds of microbial contamination. Yeah, I think what John has said has really been interesting to me. It's kind of opened my eyes in some ways to a segment, a vertical market that he's obviously very well in tune with and very professional in the way he approaches it. But it is, in some ways, kind of a unique market. And I think what we've realized is that because it's unique, it needs some unique training. It needs some broader training in some ways, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I think the other thing that's important is that what's common with this vertical market is what we're finding everywhere, Jeff, and that's that there's just more and more and more awareness about how indoor air quality is affecting people's health. And in the hospitality side of it is how it's affecting the guest experience. And that obviously comes down to ultimately money. And so I think what's interesting is that this awareness is now bled over to the hospitality industry. And I'm just glad John's able to take care of it and run with it because he knows this vertical market so well.
And John is dedicated because it's his bedtime, although it's morning for me and Doug.
That's right.
Definitely.
All right. So, Doug, I'm going to stick with you on this question because you mentioned a broader training concept. So, from a standards and training perspective, how are organizations like NORMI helping hospitality groups create that consistency across multiple properties and regions?
Yeah, I think standardization is so important. And we're very fortunate to have the ANSI S520, ICRC S520 in place as kind of our standard of care. That's obviously a very important document, and it fits every single kind of environment. And so that's obviously incredibly important. But what NORMI has tried to do is NORMI's tried to say, well, how do we get to that standard? How do we get to that goal post? And the way we do that is with our NORMI professional practices. And in those practices, we start talking about protocols, DIY programs, awareness, all of that dealing not only with mold, visible mold issues, but also dealing with quote unquote invisible mold issues and microbial contaminants. And so I think the thing that's really important, and why I love this partnership with John, is that there's really two sides of this that we have to address in the hospitality side. One is simple awareness. And what I mean by that is we want the person on the cleaning cart that's working out there every single day, when they see a problem, we want them to be able to identify it and hand it up so it can be dealt with, because in some ways they're kind of like the first responder. They're the first one that finds mold in the bathroom, and they need to address it, know what it is, and know how to address it. The second side of it is training their facilities maintenance managers and so forth about how to actually do the work. Now, they may not do the work, DIY, do it yourself, in-house, but they need to know how that work needs to be done, when they need to call a professional, and how that work needs to be done so that it's done correctly. So it's kind of a broad sweeping training concept, not just awareness, but also how the work should actually be done with protocols that should be used. But the main point that I think I would make about this, to answer to your question, Jeff, is it's about standardization. Let's do it the right way every single time. Yet let's use science-based protocols to make sure that things are done correctly.
Do it the right way every time.
Every time.
Concepts are being offered here, that's for sure.
And as we know, I remember my dad telling me this years and years ago. If you do it right, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, you won't have time to do it right the second. And I think that's really important.
Dad was smart and accurate for sure. John, feel free to add to what Doug mentioned there, but I have a question for you to focus on. Working in Asia, what unique challenges do hospitality brands face when it comes to indoor air quality and mold, and how are they adapting to those conditions?
Sure. Well, actually, first I will add a couple of things to what Doug said there. He's already touched on it, but the shared understanding within the property is critical. So, what we've tried to do in our program that I've developed with NORMI is to ensure that within the properties who take up our training program, there's a shared understanding across multiple departments in the property about indoor air quality and mold and how to address it. Also, it's quite critical that, as you mentioned, Doug, quite often they're not going to be doing the work themselves. They're going to be getting outside contractors to come in, but they need to understand the process and procedures that the contractor should be following to ensure that the contractor does the job and does it right. Too often I've seen with a lot of properties, not just in Asia, but also in the Middle East, where they think that when they contract something out and they have someone coming in to do the work, they take a hands-off approach, and it's no longer my problem; it's the contractor's problem, and that's really flawed. They must have an understanding of what they're doing, so that they can ensure that the problems and issues that they're getting them to address are addressed properly. So now I'll get back to your question, Jeff. So Asia presents very different IAQ and mold challenges for hospitality brands, largely because of both climate and density. Many properties are operating in hot, humid environments year-round, which means mold pressure is constant rather than seasonal. Also have high occupancy, frequent guest turnover, buildings running 24/7, which means even small lapses in humidity control, ventilation balance, or maintenance can escalate really, really quickly. And as you mentioned, Doug, consistency is a huge issue. So you've got brands operating across, Southeast Asia, North Asia, coastal regions, all at the same time, each with different climates, construction practices, regulatory expectations. So solutions that like work in Tokyo aren't going to necessarily work in Singapore or Bali. So the way leading brands tend to adapt is by shifting from reactive fixes to prevention. They're investing more in humidity control, smarter HVAC operation, constant monitoring, better commissioning, clearer brand standards, while still allowing local teams the flexibility to adapt to specific local conditions. So what's really changed and what has to change is mindset. In Asia, especially, hospitality leaders are recognizing that IAQ and mold aren't engineering problems. They're guest experience, reputation, and asset protection issues. Once it's seen that way, the approach can change quite radically.
I want to add to what I said earlier, if I could, Jeff. I'm sure you can stick this in, but in regards to training and certification, I think what's interesting is because NORMI has strengthened our alliance with the ISSA, we now have a wide range of training programs that we can put together for this Asian market and for the U.S. market in helping the cleaning industry understand what we do on the mold side and then helping our professionals understand on the cleaning side. And so that alliance has really strengthened our portfolio, as it were, of classes that we're now able to offer. And what's been interesting to me is, and John can be very specific about this, but we're now training these things in multiple languages, in Mandarin and Japanese and Vietnamese. And that's kind of an exciting place to be, to reach out into that market and help people who English is not their standard language, but to be able to train hundreds and hundreds of people in the kinds of things that we know will help them improve their indoor environments.
Thank you for adding that. Doug, let's go to you on this. There's a strong connection between indoor air quality and guest experience beyond a, oh my, what's that smell scenario when you walk into a space. We've all been there. We've all had that thought. But deeper, how are leading brands turning this from a behind the scenes issue into a visible part of their value proposition? Thinking about that correlation.
I think that's a great question. And as there's become more and more awareness to folks who have issues in indoor environments, you think about if you're really concerned about that, you're going to make sure that the house that you live in is clean. You're going to make sure that you're taking care of the indoor air quality and so forth. So when you go to a hotel, you're aware of the fact that they're either doing a good job or they're not doing a very good job about dealing with the kinds of things that are important to you. And so what we're finding, interestingly enough, is that there are some leading brands that are actually setting aside specific rooms for people that they know are sensitized. They know that they've got to spend a little more time, a little more effort making sure that that particular environment is clean. There's a lot of times when I go to a hotel and I'll ask them specifically ahead of time, when you clean, will you not, please don't use certain, toxic chemicals, because I don't want to go into a room, although I take my air purifier every time I do. I don't want to go into a room necessarily and take 2 hours to get rid of the odors. And so I think the point is that because of that awareness, leading brands are realizing that if they don't set aside at least part of their rooms, they're going to have problems with guests. And so that's become, I think, a really important part of this is, again, back to the awareness side of it, brands realizing that they need to go above and beyond what might be considered simply cleaning and making sure that they're cleaning for health, not just for appearance.
Thank you, Doug. And John, before we move into our next question, anything to add to that?
Sort of just expanding a little bit, I guess. So really, the goal for hotels, in particular luxury area, is to create an environment where nothing distracts from the comfort and relaxation for the guests. So the guests have to come away with a complete feeling of comfort. So they know, for example, they know they always sleep well here, or the rooms just feel better. And that's really indoor air quality just doing its job as a luxury differentiator. It's also, we've already discussed training, but this training is an important aspect of this as well. So having a common understanding amongst the staff, and also not relying wholly and completely on the staff to make sure things are as they should be. So I always encourage my clients to do periodic audits, not only on a regular basis, like depending on the property annually or every 2 years, but also whenever there is a major event at the property, such as major renovation, rebalancing, or recommissioning.
Which really underscores the need for ongoing monitoring as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some great equipment out there that can in real time let them know that there's an issue that they need to address on the indoor air quality space. So, and that's exactly where we're headed, is making sure that not only if there's a problem, it's dealt with correctly, but making sure that that problem doesn't come back, and then monitoring it to make sure that it hasn't.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important. So all major properties have building management systems and possibly guest room management systems, and these monitors must integrate into those systems so that they have a unified management perspective.
John, I think I'd love to hear a list of mistakes that hotels or resorts make when it comes to mold prevention and indoor air quality. Because I've traveled a lot, I've been in a lot of nice hotels and I've seen these issues. What are the big issues that you're seeing out there?
The biggest issue is treating issues of indoor air quality and mold as reactive maintenance issues instead of a prevention strategy. Many organizations actually tend to only act once there's visible mold, odor, complaints, or negative guest feedback. By then, the problem is already established, and that's a big issue. And also, a lot of properties tend to focus on temperature and overlook moisture control, especially in humid climates. If you don't actively manage humidity, even a well-designed HVAC system is going to struggle. And this is a particular problem in Asia, because many jurisdictions in Asia set standards with higher temperature and relative humidity, because they recognize that maintaining humidity below 60% is quite difficult in Asia. For hotels, especially luxury hotels, it is important to target best practice rather than jurisdictional standards. The other issue, again, we have really covered this one quite a bit, and that's making sure that indoor air quality and mold is not siloed. In many hotels, it tends to be just simply an engineering issue, and it's not. It's important that every department in the property understands the basics of indoor air quality and mold and recognizes that they have their own role to play. So in my training, I've coined a phrase that came from a terrorism background, and that is see something, say something. But it's actually see something, smell something, feel something, then say something. And that applies to everybody in the property. If they smell something, they've got to report it or do something about it immediately. I too often see in properties, I walk into an area of the property and I can smell mold, or I see condensation on the supply vents. And I go to the staff operating in that area and say, have you seen this or smelt this? And they don't even know. They don't even notice. And that's a really big problem. So that's one of the reasons that we created, NORMI and my company created this training program that targets hotels and resorts initially in Asia and the Middle East, but ultimately we would like to see this rolling out across the world.
Smell something, say something. I like
And
it.
I would add something.
See something, feel something.
And I would add something. I would add something to that. I think one of the biggest issues that I see, and it's not just in the hospitality industry, but a lot of vertical markets where there are large, huge bureaucracies, is not recognizing that this really has to be a team approach. Everybody has to take responsibility for what they've seen, what they've smelled. Everybody needs to realize that their responsibility is to make sure that this is actually taken care of. And so don't ignore what you see, don't ignore what you smell, don't ignore what someone's told you, but just make sure that as a team, this is important and this is why it's important. And I think that's the great job that John's doing with this training program, is that he's making sure that everyone in a particular property is being trained in the way they need to be trained. In the construction industry, we would have toolbox trainings, and sometimes on a commercial project, we would do it every single morning. That kind of team approach, I think, is something that's sometimes neglected in larger organizations, but it makes everybody understand how important it is, or how important the actual goal is for that particular company. And certainly for hospitality, it's guest comfort has to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We are about out of time, but we have one question to wrap up with. John, we'll start with you on this, and Doug, you'll get the final word. I know you love final word. So
I do.
so
He
John,
does.
for hospitality leaders watching this, starting can be the most difficult part. A real start, a positive way of approaching this. Where should they start if they want to elevate their indoor air quality strategies, what they do, and mold strategies as well across their properties?
So really, it's an attitude issue. So they need to see indoor air quality and mold as a guest experience and asset protection issue, and not as a facilities or compliance issue. Making that connection leads to everything else: improve retention, improve revenue, improve reputation. So the focus needs to be on prevention, not reaction. That means understanding all aspects of indoor air quality and mold, hence training, and addressing risks before guests even have a possibility of noticing a problem. So, as we said already, breaking down silos, ensuring that all aspects of the property have an understanding, engineering, housekeeping, front office, all influence IAQ. So, shared standards, training, and accountability matter just as much as equipment. A commitment to training in indoor air quality and mold is an essential component, as regular external audits. Finally, from me, leaders need to really think at scale. The strongest brands establish a clear global framework for indoor air quality and mold prevention, while still allowing flexibility for different climates and regions. That balance between consistency and local adaptation leads to real progress. The brands that get this right don't start with the technology. They start with intent and commitment. They decide that air quality is part of the experience they're selling, and then they build the systems and the structure to support that decision.
And Doug, as promised, final word. Bring it home.
Well, I can't underscore what John said any more than he said. That's exactly right. And I think it starts with awareness. They've got to realize that there's a problem and that problem needs to be addressed. And then once they say, yes, let's address indoor air quality, we've absolutely got pathway that we can give them that will get them to where they need to go. But I think this is where I could talk for a second about the importance of NORMI being connected to a medical advisory board. There are more and more and more people being affected by indoor air quality. And Dr. Heyman, as head of our medical advisory board, has told us and showed us ways that we can help people become more aware of the problem. That, to me, is the first step. And so this is where I'm going to promote NORMI.org, where they can go and take a look at a great new movie that was just launched called Mold, a Hidden Epidemic. And it was put together with Dr. Heyman for the purpose of helping people understand that this is really serious. And why not get on top of the problem today? And that's the point. And I think that's a really good place for me to end. That would be my last word.